Hi, welcome to Constitutional Chats, hosted by me, Janine Turner,
and Cathy Gillespie,
with students
Takara Chapman
and me, Tova Kaplan.
Join us as we discuss hot topic issues with constitutional experts. It's sponsored by Constituting America.
Welcome to the show, Constitutional Chats by Constituting America. I'm Janine Turner. I'm your co-host along with Cathy Gillespie, Tova Love Kaplan, and Takara Chapman. So come on in, have a seat. And we have a great show for you today. We're going to talk about the Electoral College. That is our constitutional subject today. And our guest, our constitutional expert, is Tara Ross. And we're very excited to have her. She's a friend of mine and of ours at Constituting America. And she's written a children's book on the Electoral College, but she's written many articles for adults and other books about the Electoral College. So we're thrilled that she's with us to explain it to us again, because the last one was for adults and now we're going to talk to, just have a session for kids. But I figure I'm probably going to learn more for the session for kids than I did for the other session, because it's just very complicated.
We want to thank today's sponsor, Dr. Tom Cleary. Dr. Cleary is a longtime supporter of Constituting America, and he is also a very generous supporter of Mount Vernon, George Washington's home, and he's very active in many other charitable causes. So we thank Dr. Cleary for sponsoring today's Constitutional Chat.
Yes, thank you so much. What I like to say is it takes two wings for a bird to fly, right? Two wings. And I always say Cathy and I are co-presidents of Constituting America, and without Cathy, I would just be flapping around, not getting off the ground, and vice versa, I guess. We need each other. But the wind beneath our wings, the wind that gets us off the ground, the sky in the air, and the food on the branches is all from our donors. So we wouldn't be flying. The Constituting America would not exist without you. So we thank you so much. Once again, I'm Janine Turner. By trade, I'm an actress. You can explore all those other things that I do at JanineTurner.com. But I'm the founder and co-president of Constituting America. We've been in existence for 10 years. And Cathy Gillespie is my dear, best, most wonderful friend in the world. And she's also co-president of Constituting America. She was a chief of staff on the Hill for 20 years or more. So she is quite the administrative expert. And she's also one of the few citizens, very few, that have been chosen to be on the Semi-Quincentennial Commission, planning the 250th anniversary of our Declaration of Independence. So it's a prestigious panel, the commission that she's on, but I think they're really lucky to have Cathy. Cathy, would you like to say hello?
Hi, everybody. We're glad that you're here, and we're excited for Tara to be with us, and this is a great topic, so I'm looking forward to it.
And a very timely topic, we might add. And our show without the extraordinary students from our National Youth Board. It consists of former winners of our We the Future contest. And Tova Love Kaplan is a 3-time winner of our contest, Left Brain, Right Brain. She's in 8th grade, won in the entrepreneurial category where she created a marketing plan. Then she won for PSA, and most recently an app, which we're supposed to have up by Halloween. We'll see if we're on schedule for that. She may be freaking out. But she created an app and won again. But she's also the National Youth Director of Constituting America, and both she and Dakare, who I'm going to introduce in just a minute, they are very actively a part of this organization. They get on conference calls with us. They design their own questions. They help us with titles and series and everything. They're just, and with other projects as well. So we're very lucky to have Tova Love Kaplan. She's just already a very talented CEO, and I expect to see her in the government, ruling the world someday, or running a CEO top 100 company. Tova, would you like to say hello?
Sure. Thank you so much, Janine. You always give the best compliments. And thank you all so much to Constituting America for everything you've done. And thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in. I'm so excited to get into this.
Thank you, Tova. So am I. And Takara Chapman, Well, we're going to see him on the Tony, getting an award at Tonys and Emmys and Academy Awards. He is already a working actor. He's usually on the set. He's working on Outer Banks right now. I think that's what he's working on. But Takara Chapman is our national student ambassador. His face is on billboards all over the country for Constituting America. He has won our contest, We the Future contest, twice. Check it all out at constitutingamerica.org. One for short film and one for PSA, both extraordinarily fabulous. Dakare brings so much to the table, just like Tova, and is our national youth ambassador. We're just so proud of him, and he's a working actor, but he also wants to be a politician, but he believes, really, if you want to be a politician, you need to be an actor. So, Dakare, we're thrilled to have you on the show. You bring so much to the show. Tell us, it is Outer Banks you're on right now, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am, it is. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Janine and Cathy, for your for just making me a part of this, and to Tova, who I call my boss. That's who I call my boss, Tova. And thank you, Tara, for being here, and to all of our donors, and we hope you guys enjoy today, okay?
And if Dakare just scoots to his right, camera left a little bit, there is the billboard. Looky there, there's the billboard that's his face all over the country. And that was his slogan. He designed, what?
I have to talk, I think, for them to see it. So yeah, there's the billboard. It's gorgeous. I don't really know where this one is, but it's somewhere in Texas, I'm sure. So.
Yes, well, there's one on my county road up here, but but you coming up with this logo. It's an American thing, so learn it or know it. It's just really great. Okay, our special Tara Ross is nationally recognized for her expertise on the Electoral College. She is the author of Why We Need the Electoral College in 2019, and another book, The Indispensable Electoral College, How the Founders' Plan Saves Our Country from Mob Rule, amen to that, 2017. We Elect a President, The Story of Our Electoral College in 2016, and Enlightened Democracy, The Case for the Electoral College. So could there be a better expert on this? She's also the author of She Fought Too, Stories of Revolutionary War Heroines. This is a weird word, in 2019, and a co-author of Under God, George Washington and the Question of Church and State, 2008. Her Prager University video, kind of cool, this Prager University. Do You Understand the Electoral College? Is Prager's most viewed video ever, with more than, are you ready for this? 60 million views. Wow. Okay. Tara often appears as a guest on a variety of talk shows nationwide, and she regularly addresses civic, university, and legal audiences. She's contributed to many law reviews and newspapers, including the National Law Journal, USA Today, the Washington Examiner, The Hill, the Washington Times, and FoxNews.com. She addressed audiences at institutions such as the Cooper Union, Brown University, the Dole Institute of Politics, and Mount Vernon. She appeared on Fox News, C-SPAN, NPR, and a variety of other national and local shows. Tara is a retired lawyer and a former editor-in-chief of the Texas Review of Law and Politics. She obtained her BA from Rice University and her JD from the University of Texas School of Law, and she resides in Dallas with her husband and children. Tara Ross, woo! Thank you for being with us today.
Okay, thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're going to let you just do your little intro of 3 to 5 minutes about the Electoral College, and then we're going to jump in and ask questions.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to talk long because the questions are the best part. And if everybody will give me a few seconds here, I'm going to talk to the elementary school and the middle school kids that are in this audience right now. And so I got to tell you, I've given this talk a bunch of times, but in those talks, people are always sitting in front of me on a rug, usually gathered in a circle. So do me a favor, pretend like you were sitting on a rug and we are all gathered here, and we can talk back and forth. And I'm going to ask you to do something for me. Because one of the first things I ever do, usually when I'm in person, is I say, tell me, have you ever been with your parents when they go to vote? So you guys may know on Zoom, if you go up to the corner, there is a place, it's right by the chat box, but you can raise your hand. So all of you elementary school and middle school kids out there, if you could do me a favor and raise your hand and let me know if you have been to vote. And if you have been with your parents, because I would like to see it. I'm going to actually, I think I can, yeah, I think I fixed it so I can see. So raise your hand. I can see that some of you guys have been with your parents to vote. And did they let you look at you might have to just tell the person next to you, did they let you look at the ballot? Did you get to see it? If you did see it, what you probably saw is you probably saw the name of the people running for president. In 2016, that would have been Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and you would have seen a list of other third-party names, whoever they were, I don't even remember anymore. This year, if you get the chance to go and vote with your parents, you'll see Joe Biden and you'll see Donald Trump, and then you'll see some other names below it. And it looks like your parent went there to go vote for the president directly. It looks like they are actually going to go vote for Donald Trump or Joe Biden. So here's the surprising part. They are not voting for Donald Trump or Joe Biden. It just looks like they are. But this is what's really happening. What's really happening is there's two parts to our election. The very first part of the election is the one that you're going with your parents to that election, but it's an election only in your state. So I'm in Texas. I'm going to go vote. When I go vote, I'm voting only with other Texans. The people in Oklahoma next door, they have a completely different election. The people in Louisiana on our other side, they have their own election too. In Texas, we're going to go vote for something called a presidential elector. And there are 38 of them in Texas because that's how many people Texas has in Congress. So we're going to go vote for 38 presidential electors. Now, so here's what happens. If I go vote for Donald Trump or Joe Biden, that there are 38 people, presidential electors, who have agreed to vote for Donald Trump, or there are 38 people, Democrats, who have agreed to go vote for Joe Biden. So even though it looks like I'm voting directly for Donald Trump or Joe Biden, I'm actually voting for the people who are going to go represent Texas and who have agreed how they're going to vote. Okay, now that's confusing, but that's part one of the election. And then part two of the election is when all of those people that we elected on election day go to vote in something called the Electoral College. And the Electoral College is simply a name for all of those people. There's 538 of them from all of the states who got elected during that process that you watched your parents go vote in. Now, so this seems confusing. You might say, why don't we just go vote? Just go vote. Why don't we go say, I'm going to cast a ballot for Donald Trump, or I'm going to cast a ballot for Joe Biden? Well, the reason we don't do that is because we want to make sure that presidential candidates have to pay attention to everybody in the country. Everybody. Texas has 29 million people in it. California, I forget how much they have, but I think it's approaching 40 million. There are very big numbers of people in some of these really big states. And if we decided to have an election where only people voted, in a one-part election, what would happen is, unfortunately, the presidential candidates would be tempted to go to those big states or to big cities where it's really easy to get people, a whole bunch of people, to vote for you. And they would only pay attention to those parts of the country. So, for instance, a Democrat might say, in California, I know they're really worried about the environment. So I'm going to go to Los Angeles or San Francisco, and there's millions and millions of people there who are ready to vote for me. So I'm going to tell them anything they want to hear about the environment. And I'll get a bunch of their votes that way. Or maybe a Republican would say, I'm going to go to Houston, or I'm going to go to Dallas. There's millions and millions of people in Houston and Dallas, and also lots of oil men or oil women. And so I'm going to give those oil interests anything they want, so that those millions and millions of people would come and vote for me. In that world where you have those kinds of situations going on, what happens to the farmer in Nebraska? How are they supposed to get any attention at all? Or how is a lobster fisherman in Maine? How are they supposed to get any attention at all? So when our founders set up this Electoral College, even though it sounds kind of complicated, the whole point of the whole system is we want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to have their voice heard in the election of the President of the United States. So the Electoral College does other things too, but at its core, that's what it's doing, is it's helping to make sure that presidential candidates pay attention to all of us. So I would love to take questions, because I always think questions are the best part of any talk, because then I get to hear what you guys want to know, and we could talk about that.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that wonderful introduction there. Tova, I'm gonna let you go first.
Sure. So thank you so much for providing that overview. It's definitely a very complicated topic, so it's good that everyone understands it, even kids. And I found that a lot of people are very misinformed about what the Electoral College is, because it is a very complicated process, and people don't really understand it. They don't really take the time to understand it, and they kind of prefer to just launch into these big debates without actually knowing what it is. So what would you say are the biggest misconceptions about the Electoral College that people have, and how would you correct those misconceptions?
I think one of the biggest misperceptions about the Electoral College is that the only reason the founders created it was because they didn't have very good travel or very good communications back then. They needed a shortcut or something to help them deal with that stuff. And it's just not true at all. I mean, clearly the founders did have trouble. It took them a long time. They traveled by horse and buggy. we travel by airplanes, or we have the internet. Clearly there are some things that are different, but that's not what drove the decisions at the Constitution. What drove the decisions at the Constitution boiled down to the founders' knowledge of history. They had studied so many governmental systems, and they knew how easy it is for a simple democracy where, one person, one vote is how people refer to that, but they knew how badly that can mess up. Now, an example that might make a lot of sense to the elementary and middle school kids in the audience is, if you have 2 wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner, I mean, how's the sheep going to fare in that vote? They're going to do very badly. The sheep is going to get eaten for dinner. And so the founders knew, just because everybody gets a vote does not necessarily mean that everybody is going to get treated well. And so they needed to create something better. And they knew that history, again, they went back to history, and they knew all of the old history about all of the old democracies and how they had failed. But the other thing that they knew is really pretty simple. They knew that people mess up. People are imperfect. People, they have bad motives. And sometimes they just, all of us sitting here know that this is true. We've messed up on our own lives, or we've said things to our parents that we didn't mean to say, or got in trouble. The founders knew that people are not perfect. And they knew that, especially if you give somebody a lot of power, if you give a president or a governor or a senator, if you give them too much power, then they might use that power to be a bully and to do things to you that are not fair or right. And the founders wanted to live in a country where, look, the people are in charge, voters are in charge. And so they needed every single kind of protection that they could give the system to make sure that bullies would not get too much power in our government and take advantage of it. So there are many, many things in our Constitution that help us with that, but the Electoral College is one of them.
Thank you. That was a great answer. I wish more people understood that. And so also a lot of young people have a misconception that, since they can't vote, they have absolutely no effect on the political process. There's nothing they can do. Why should I even care about this? So why do you think young people should care about the Electoral College process? And for people that are too young to vote, which is probably most of our audience today, how can young people affect the political process and get engaged in this system?
Well, first I'll just start by saying you might be too young to vote now, but you won't be someday. And you don't want to wait all the way until you're old enough to vote and then try to figure it out all at once on the last day. That's a really bad idea. You should just know what's going on the whole time and be involved and be engaged, because then when you get to be old enough to vote, you will decide how you want to cast your ballot. If you wait too long to learn about it, you're going to end up just getting used by somebody and tricked into voting some way that maybe you wouldn't have if you'd put more time and thought into it. So learn about it yourself. You should always, always know the issues on your own, figure it out. And by the time you're old enough to vote, you won't have a lot of catch up to do. But look, the other thing I'll say is, so I've got an 8-year-old boy. I've got a daughter who's older, but I'll tell you, my 8-year-old boy, he has gotten some adults thinking, because he is always, he knows, he could have a discussion with you. He knows everything that's going on about everything. And then he talks to adults about it. And I'm telling you, nobody is too young to get the adults around them thinking about things that they should be thinking about. And I'm sure there's other things you can do too, like to, help with candidates in your neighborhood or something, if your parents are doing that also. But you are never too young to know any of this stuff or to influence the people around you.
Okay, Dakare.
Yes, that was really good. I know that I personally always look for things to do, and I've been a poll worker since I was a freshman in high school. And this year I'm going to be a poll manager, so isn't that fun? So one of my questions was, of course, was this idea of an electoral college, where did this come from? Like, how did they figure out all of the ins and outs? Because there's definitely a lot of ins and outs, as we learned last week when we spoke with Miss Pelosi and I can't remember the other lady's last name, Cathy, but our elector from North Carolina. So Jenkins, yes. So where did these ideas come from? Was another country doing this, or is this like a thing it's just an American thing? Not typical.
It's a good question. Thank you. It's pretty uniquely American. And maybe this will make some of y'all laugh, but the answer is not simple. They spent the whole summer batting around ideas. I mean, if you've ever been to a brainstorming session, they were just dumping out ideas, and about everything, by the way. Are we going to have one president? Maybe we should have more than one president. Maybe we shouldn't put all that power in the hands of one person. Maybe we should have 3 presidents. Maybe we should have the governors elect the president. Maybe, and they went through all of these. I mean, more than I can recount to you now without going back to look at the list. They had so many different ideas, but the 2 ideas that they kind of boiled down to at the end were legislative selection. So the people that you elect to Congress, imagine that the House of Representatives and the United States Senate gets together and they elect the president. That's sort of similar to how prime ministers are elected in some other countries. So that's kind of the roots of, I imagine, where that idea came from. Or the other idea was just everybody go and vote. Just a simple 1 person, 1 vote, everybody go vote for the president. But they didn't want to do Congress voting for the president because they believed very strongly that we should have a very sharp division among the branches. We need the legislature to do only the legislature's job. We need the executive to do the executive's job. We call it separation of powers. Like each branch has its own thing that it does. And so they were worried that if the Congress was in charge of electing the president, that the president would not really be independent enough, that he would not make, or she would not make up his own mind. And he would feel like he had to do whatever the Congress wanted him to do. And they didn't want that. They wanted the president to be his own person that would do his own job and be his own part of the system of checks and balances. So they didn't want to do congressional selection. On the other hand, when they started talking about a simple, let's just have everybody go vote for president, the small state delegates got very upset and said, there's no way we're doing this because we will get outvoted all the time. There was one small state delegate from Delaware who said, the way it's written in the notes of the convention, you could tell he was very upset because it's like, it looked like it was underlined or italicized or like something had happened. He must have been speaking very vehemently, but he said, I do not trust you. And then he said, gentlemen, because he was probably trying to be polite. I do not trust you, gentlemen. If you had the power, the abuse of it could not be checked, and you would exercise it to our destruction. So what he meant by that is, if the small states give the big states the power to outvote us, we will be destroyed. The small states will be destroyed. And the small states would not have agreed to the Constitution without some kind of special plan in there for election of presidents. So how they actually got down to the final thing, that's a little bit of an unknown. The concept of electors had been thrown out at various times, but what ended up happening is there was a committee that went to go kind of finish the committee of unfinished business. They were going to go finish, or maybe it's postponed matters. They were going to go finish all this stuff. And they, James Madison apparently sketched it out with pen and paper, his idea for the other people on that committee to look at, but they didn't tell us exactly what happened. And all we know is that he came up with that. And then they came back to the full convention and presented the idea. And everybody, for the most part, everybody liked it.
That's awesome. So my other question is, so we have I guess certain states that are saying that they would like just give their vote to the person who wins the popular vote. And so my question is, first of all, is that technically like constitutional? Is that like a state thing more than a federal thing? And like, how would that cause problems?
So I think you're talking about the compact where they agreed to give their voters or their electors to the winner of the national popular vote instead of the state popular vote. Okay. So I'll start by saying the way that you're supposed to change the Electoral College, if we wanted to get rid of it, you know, which I don't, but if somebody wanted to get rid of it, the way you're supposed to do it is you get 2/3 of Congress. So more than half, you get 2/3 of Congress to agree to it and to present the idea to all of the states. And then you need 3/4 of the states to all agree to this also. So way more than half of the states to say, we all agree to this. Now that's very hard. And there are a lot of
In other words, I'll
states.
I'll just interject in there. That's called an amendment. So they would have to
Right.
amend the Constitution, which can
Right.
be done
That's-
either through Convention of States, but the right way to do it is through an amendment, just so they know that term. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Right. So, oh, no, it's fine. So that would be a formal constitutional amendment process, and that's how you get it through. And Janine's right. You could technically get a bunch of states to call for the convention on their own, but that's never been done in history. Typically, what happens is 2/3 of Congress that pushes for this, that makes it happen, or presents the idea to the states. So the process for an amendment is really hard. It's just hard, and it's unlikely to happen. So there are some people who are very upset about that. And so they had this idea, and their idea is, and they wanted something simple. This is going to be easy, and we won't need as many people to agree. And so they had this idea that we will go sign a contract. Okay, we'll get states to sign a contract. Now, for you younger kids out there, you may know your parents sign contracts for things like, it could be anything. It could be, I'm going to sign a contract saying I agree to certain terms so I can go use this trampoline gym, or I'm going to go sign a contract so that we can buy this house. It's called a mortgage. I mean, there are different kinds of contracts that you use to do different things in life, but it's just a legal agreement between two parties to do something. And so what they are saying is, we're just going to get states to sign a contract because the constitutional amendment is too hard. And so we're going to do a contract. Now, right now, they have gotten 15 states plus Washington, D.C. to sign this contract. The contract will go into effect when they get enough people on the contract to control the outcome of the election. So when 270 electors are all bound by the contract. And so the 15 states plus DC that I told you about, that's 196 electors, because they have several big states in the mix, and they just need 74 more electors, which they could do with just, I mean, depending on the size states they do, but a handful of medium-sized states would get it done. And so they would be at their goal of 270 electors to win the presidential election if with less than half of the states on board, and that's crazy. And so you asked about whether this is legal. My opinion is definitely not. I mean, it will end up in the court, and the court will end up deciding. But what I would note that, look, states can give their elector, they have lots of methods they can use to decide who their electors are going to be. However, they are not allowed to use a method that violates the Constitution. So I'll give you an easy example. If my state, Texas, were to say, we're going to hold an election to decide who gets the 38 electors, Republicans or Democrats, but women don't get to vote. Yeah, no women, just men. Well, that would get struck down, right? Because there's this thing called the 19th Amendment that says you can't treat women differently in elections than men. So the state's not allowed to do that. And I would argue that the state is not allowed to give away its electors in violation of the constitutional amendment process.
I find this whole thing to be really fascinating. I'm going to jump in here for a second because I haven't asked any questions yet, but Tova and Dakare, great questions. I find it incredulous first of all, when the electors agreed, that was to this compact, that those were electors who happened to be elected that particular election cycle, because there could potentially new electors every, so what do you mean when the electors agreed?
It was the state legislature. The state,
oh, the state
legislature, yeah,
okay.
the state, sorry if I misspoke there. State legislatures agreed to this, but it would determine who they appointed. So right now, California has signed this contract. That's 55 electors. Right now, the contract's not in effect, so the 55 California electors will go to the winner of California. However, if this contract were in effect in a year, say it had been in effect 2004, California was won by John Kerry. However, George W. Bush won the national popular vote. What they are saying is that California's 55 electors will be Republican electors who will go vote for the Republican, because the Republican won the national popular vote, even though a Democratic candidate won the state of California. Which, by the way, that's the thought that a state like California is just going to roll over and do that. You know, they're going to end up, they're going to pull themselves out of the contract, right, and just refuse to do it. It's going to end up being a huge legal mess, because
I find it just incredulous that if Nebraska votes for, say, Biden, but Trump wins, that Nebraska is just going to give all their votes. Oh, there we go. Nebraska is just going to give all their votes. Who did I just say won? Okay, let's say Biden won.
Sorry.
Okay, let's say Biden. Okay, let's say Biden won the election, but Nebraska voted for Trump. So the people in the state, the majority of the people in the state of Nebraska voted for Trump, but Biden won the popular vote. And so Nebraska, they're just going to turn over what the people of Nebraska said. I mean, I don't understand how let's say, like you just said, California, Trump won the popular vote, and suddenly California wanted Biden, and California's just going to give over all their votes. It doesn't make any sense to me that states would just acquiesce the will of their people in the state based on what the rest of the country is doing. I don't even I can't even comprehend this. It doesn't even make any sense to me. Do I have this correct? I'm saying it correctly,
you have
right?
You have it correct. It's actually even worse than that. I mean, even worse, if California had decided not to put Donald Trump on their ballot like they said they were going to do a couple months ago, if they had done that and then Trump won the national popular vote, even though he wasn't on their ballot, they would give their 55 electors to Trump. That's the wording of the contract. That's how it's worded. So, but I'm gonna go back to, I think what really happens is you end up in a big legal fight, because what's going to actually happen are states are going to start pulling out of the contract when they realize that this stuff is about to happen, you know.
Well, that it could reverse their original intention. I just can't imagine that the whole entire populace of these states really want that to happen. So, but it's a good argument for the youth to understand, because what they're hearing is that the popular vote is the most important thing. They're swimming upstream if they believe that the Electoral College matters. So it's really good to reinforce why the Electoral College matters, because it's for the voice of all the other states in the country, not just the four, which would mean, you know, as you said earlier, California, Florida, Texas, and New York would be deciding the election for the rest of the country. And that's fine if you live in one of those four states, but if you don't, it's really pretty crazy. So it's really good to hone the conversation so people know how to have an educated conversation. Why is it always, you know, that it's easier to explain popular vote should win than it is to explain why the Electoral College matters? You know, the Constitution's complex, so it's so much easier for the simple sounding solution to win, because it's easier to understand instead of trying to explain the more complicated, which is the better argument. So it's really good to kind of hone in why it matters. Okay, Cathy, your turn.
Well, this has been great. Thank you so much, Tara. I wanted to bring attention back to Tara's book for a second, which is called We Elect a President. And it is a great book for parents and grandparents to teach your kids about the Electoral College. And I know Lisa Williams spent a lot of time scanning in a few pages of Tara's book. in preparation for the Zoom, and I thought it'd be great to show the map, the Electoral College map, because I was thinking that maybe some of the kids that are watching might want to see how many votes their state actually has in the Electoral College. And then I wanted to ask Tara, again, just for the kids watching, to clarify, it takes 270 votes to win on election night. Is that correct, Tara?
That's correct. 270 is a majority of 538. And you just, when you threw up this map, you reminded me, there was a question earlier about how kids can help. Well, this map was drawn by somebody in high school. All of the illustrations in the book were drawn by somebody in high school. She's wonderful. Her name is Kate Cooper. So there is no shortage of ways that you can help your country if you want to. If you're an artist, you know, look, there are opportunities. Go do something with your art. There's always something to help.
So, and I wanted to point out, in my home state of Virginia, there's 13 electoral college votes. Like you said, in Texas, there's 38. Tova's talking to us from Chicago, from Illinois, and so I'm looking. What is that? Is that 20? 20. Dakare speaking to us from North Carolina. How many electoral college votes do we have in North Carolina? Is that 15?
It's 15, but I'm in Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh, that's right. I always forget that. We're in Charleston, so that's 9. So on election night, what that means is we watch when the presidential candidates win, or, you know, the different states, they have a running tally that they keep updating us on. And that, I guess, is why the number 270 is so important, because when the candidates win enough states where their electoral college votes add up to 270, then that's going to be the winner of the presidential campaign. Is that right?
That's right. Whoever gets 270 first. And if nobody gets 270, by the way, we end up going to something called a House contingent election. And that's actually where, in that case, the House of Representatives picks the president from the top 3 vote getters, whoever they might be.
Now, okay, Tara, has that ever happened? And then I have a follow-up question, which is, what if there's a tie?
So same thing, it will still go to the House of Representatives if there's a tie. The last time something like this happened was in 1824. And in 1824, it was an election between John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson had won a plurality of both the popular vote and the electoral vote. Now, what plurality means for some of the younger viewers is a plurality is when you get the most, but you don't get a majority. So say somebody has 40%, somebody has 30%, or 2 people have 30%. My math on the fly is notoriously bad. So, but you have a bunch of people with percents that are all below 50. So Andrew Jackson had a plurality of both electoral and popular votes, and John Quincy Adams, and he went into the election with one other person, and actually John Quincy Adams ended up winning the election anyway, because he ended up getting more votes from more state delegations. And there was a bit of an uproar about that. The other time that this happened was in 1800. There was a tie between Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. And Aaron Burr was supposed to be the vice presidential candidate, but he ended up, that's kind of a long story, but he ended up in a tie with Thomas Jefferson. It took 36 votes in the House of Representatives before they finally settled on Thomas Jefferson as the president. So those are the only 2 times that we've used that process, but it's still there if we need it.
Are you saying it took 30, they had to vote 36 different times?
Yes. Yes, they did.
Wow. I tell you, that's a good reason to have a majority in the House, is to think that during an election year, the House is, what do they need to if it goes to the House, how many votes do they have? How many, did you say this? If so, I didn't hear it. How many votes do they have to have?
You need a majority of state delegations. So in this particular vote, the states vote as states. So Texas, even though they have 36 people in the House, would get 1 vote. Rhode Island, which has 2 congressmen in the House, would get 1 vote. California, 1 vote. Everybody gets 1 vote in the state. And so it takes 26 states to elect a president.
Oh, and now there's something I just did not know. So if it goes to the House, every state gets 1 vote, and you have to have 26 votes.
Correct.
This isn't an amendment? I was going to
So
ask about
there's
the amendments, and I want to.
the original structure of it's in Article 2. And then there's the 12th Amendment, which it replicates a lot of what's in Article 2. The main thing, but it also has this in there. And the main thing that changed between the original Constitution and the 12th Amendment is we separated the voting for president and vice president. It used to not be separate. And so I remember I said Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr tied. That's because back then, every single elector got 2 votes for president and they cast 2 ballots. And so the first place winner would be president and the second place winner would be vice president. And in the vote with Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr, Jefferson was supposed to be the presidential candidate for his party, and Aaron Burr was supposed to be the vice presidential candidate for his party. And what was supposed to happen is all of the electors were supposed to cast both of their ballots that way. But then, and one was supposed to hold back a vote from Aaron Burr so that he would come in second place. But for whatever reason, that didn't happen. And so that there ended up being a tie between the two.
So I just have in my notes here that it's Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, the original Electoral College, but it was modified by the 12th and the 23rd. Is that not correct? Was it my
the 23rd? Well, the 23rd, what it added is that now DC can vote, and that's what it did.
Okay.
DC didn't used to vote.
Lisa, do you want to say something?
I just had a quick question about what you were saying about if there is a tie, and they need 26 states. I was curious because DC is not a state. Do they have a vote in that situation or no?
They don't have a vote. They don't have a vote.
Okay, so Cathy, I'm gonna go back to Tova and Dakare and we'll close out. Go ahead, Cathy.
Okay, we have an interesting audience question in that are there some states where the electoral votes are split? I mean, in most states, I think they operate with the popular vote getting all of the electoral college votes. I know they do that in Texas, but is there a state where they allocate some of the electoral college votes to different candidates?
So that's a good question. I mean, the answer is no. There are 2 states that do it differently. And in fact, any state could do it differently. There's nothing in the Constitution about the winner take all. It's what we have fallen in the habit of doing, but it's not required at all by the Constitution. So what Maine and Nebraska do is so remember I said you have the same number of electors as you have members of Congress. So they take all of the electors representing the House of Representatives, those districts, and they award those electors to the winner of the congressional district. And then the 2 remaining votes for senator, those are awarded to the winner of the whole state. So that's what they do. They seem okay with it. Sometimes their vote split, sometimes it's not. But there are just while we're on the subject, there are lots of other things states could do. A state legislature could say, we're not even gonna hold a vote this year. We're just gonna appoint our electors directly, And I mean, that's something that's possible. In fact, and there's lots of reasons why a state might do that. In 1876, Colorado said, we simply don't have enough money to hold a vote like this. And it was logistically difficult because they had just joined the Union. And so they decided that they were the state legislature just did it. And they just appointed the electors directly. And there was never a presidential election in Colorado that year.
And that's a really interesting question because a fun fact that you just said in the Constitution it says electors will go and da 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 da, and then I'm always interested when it started because you say some states can say state legislatures going to say we're not going to hold an election, so the state representative, the state legislature is going to appoint the electors and they're going to vote their conscience, I guess, essentially for the state. When did that change? When did suddenly the people had the say of the vote in their state, and then the elector really had to represent that?
Well, so I would say most states were holding some kind of an election by the 1830s. It was pretty quick. There were a lot of states in the beginning that just appointed them directly and just did it that way, but it was a pretty quick move to voting for electors. And as far as electors voting their conscience, I mean, that's a whole big issue. Most of the time what happens is an elector says they're gonna vote a certain way. I agree to vote for this person. And that's why they got nominated to serve in the first place. And even in the 1800s, this happened all the time where something you kind of knew this person, this person likes John, this is before the 1830s, but this person likes John Adams and this person is a Thomas Jefferson elector. And in fact, the first person to vote their conscience, that was the difference between Adams and Jefferson. But Usually, historically, these are people who you know how they're going to vote. They've pledged to vote. They want to vote that way. They've worked for the party. They've done all of these different things. So just to clarify, if I'm in Texas voting on election day, there are literally 38 different sets of people for each of these candidates. There are 38 people who are ready to vote for Joe Biden. There are 38 different people who are ready to vote for Donald Trump. Each of the third party candidates has to present the state of Texas with a slate of 38 people who are pledged to vote for that third party candidate. Even a write-in candidate, if they want to be a write-in candidate, they have to have 38 people that they're ready to give to the state of Texas to say, these are the people who will vote for me as an elector representing the state of Texas. So electors want to do typically what they've been asked to do, which is why, and even in 2016, when there was all that uproar and there was uproar about electors changing their votes, but those were electors, except with two exceptions, those were electors on the losing side of the vote who were trying to change it to something else, right? Because they didn't like who was the winner. These weren't a bunch of winning presidential electors who changed their votes. It was the losers who were trying to broker a compromise. And it didn't work because most of the Donald Trump electors wanted to do what they'd been asked to do.
Yeah, I think my question was the popular, I think during Washington's time and Adams, it was just the electors who were designated by the state legislatures just made those decisions. There wasn't a popular vote for president for all the people to vote in their states. Was there?
It was different in every state, so it's a hard question to answer.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, okay.
And they,
all right.
I think they probably were more clear that they were voting for electors and not the candidate, if that's
yeah. Okay. So Dakare and Tova and Dakare, let's close out. We have, and then Cathy, let's give Cathy the last go here. So let's make it, it's lightning round.
Sure. So we got a great audience question as to why it's called the Electoral College. Could you shed some light on that?
Oh gosh, yeah, I wish I could answer that question better. It's an informal term that has cropped up over time. And I honestly could not tell you where the first use of it was. I have no idea. I guess I should know, but it's not in the Constitution. It's not a formal, there's nothing formal about it. It's something informal that has cropped up over time.
Lisa, do you have something to say?
No, I'm looking up where the term originated. I will be back.
Oh, okay. All right. Dakare, lightning round.
What inspired you to write your book?
That's an interesting question. So I'm going to tell all of the kids in the audience, you should always wear your seatbelt in the car. And that is the answer to the question. I was not wearing my seatbelt when I was in a taxi cab wreck in 2001, and I was in law school, and I needed some way to get through my last semester of law school. And I had broken my right arm because I was not wearing my seatbelt. You should always wear your seatbelt. I broke my right arm and I could not take notes in class anymore. And I still had to get through law school. I had a job waiting for me in the whole 9 yards. So I had to figure out how to get through. And so I thought, oh, well, I'll just do an independent study on the Electoral College for, 3 hours of credit. And because you don't have to take notes in the class when you're doing an independent study. And so I just thought it'll be easy. And that's literally the only reason I ever started any of this. But then when I was doing so much studying about it, I realized how much I had never known, how much nobody ever taught me any of this stuff, or any of us, any of this stuff. Most of us, unless you're attending a session like this, it's really hard to learn about the Electoral College. And the other thing I realized is this is not a system that is pro-Republican or pro-Democrat. It's a system that is pro the candidate who does the best job of bringing people together, or at least trying to understand a bunch of different kind of people. During that election of 2000, which had started, came right before my independent study, Al Gore, who was the Democratic candidate, he ended up winning the popular vote and losing the electoral vote, but he thought it was going to be the other way around. And he had lawyers working to defend that Electoral College victory, thinking that that's what he was going to have to do. And then of course, in the end, George Bush was the one who had to defend the Electoral College victory. And what that showed me is this can go either way at any time. And the important thing is for political parties to both work on doing a better job of reaching out to a wide variety of people. We've had a bunch of close elections lately, and I think that's mostly about the fact that nobody's doing a terrific job of reaching out to as many people as they could. And as soon as the parties kind of get their act together on that, we'll start seeing elections that are less painful.
I think we're seeing some changes in one of the parties at least. Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay. It was, although the United States Constitution refers to electors, the phrase electoral college nor any other name is used to describe electors collectively. It was not until the early 19th century that the name electoral college came into general usage as the collective to mean electors who are colleagues. And the phrase was first written into federal law in 1845. So.
Well, thank you, Lisa. She is our millennial. We have Z's and millennials who just can. All right, Cathy, lightning round.
Well, we have a listener who's asking if the election is disputed and it takes a long time to settle it, who will be in control until then? Do you have?
So, yeah, look, I have hope that it won't be as bad as people are saying. You know, obviously, if there's a big tussle over mail-in ballots, that's going to be a big problem. But keep in mind that one thing that the Electoral College does for us is it kind of isolates problems into states, right? So you're going to have to, the only way this is going to be an issue is if it's very close at the national level, and then also there is a state or maybe 2 or 3 states that are very, very close. Historically, we've never had these kinds of election problems except when that happened. And Florida in 2000, of course, was one state that was close, also with a national total. In 1876, there were 4 states that had issues with who their electors were going to be, and also a close total. So I have hope it won't be as bad as we are, but if it is, I mean, look, the Congress counts the votes on January 6th, and if for any reason there's a problem with that, you know, January 20th is the inauguration date. Federal law provides what happens if there's no president-elect or vice president-elect, and you just go down the line of succession. And that will, to some degree, depend on who's elected in November. Those are people that haven't been elected yet, because it will be the new Congress, not the old Congress. And so we just have to see. But it will, the answer, I guess, is just you look to the federal law, the line of succession, to see who's acting president.
And I guess it depends on when it happens, as to if it'd be the old Congress or the new Congress. I mean, if they're struggling with this decision in December.
No, there's no struggle in December, because the Congress never has an opportunity to intervene at all until January 6th when they count the votes. And so really all the way up until then, states can be straightening themselves out or deciding which, well, that's not true, because the meetings of the electors come sooner. If for some reason the electors haven't met, I mean, I could tell you what Florida was going to do in 2000. Somebody will get appointed. Let's put it that way, because the states will have a tussle. Although in 1876, what happened is there were 2 slates of electors that were appointed from 4 different states. There's 3 full states of electors. There was 1 elector in Oregon that was disputed, and the states appointed 2 different slates. So I guess you could have that happen where you have multiple slates of electors from different states voting. And that's how Congress in 1876 had to figure out how they were going to decide that problem. So I don't know. These are kind of uncharted waters, I guess you're asking me about. But as far as Congress goes, Congress does not have an opportunity to get involved until January 6th. And so, and then they'll have to decide.
They start by then.
I mean, I suppose the worst case scenario is it's something like 1876, where you have to decide which electors' votes from the states you're going to accept. Now, there are people that will argue that Congress got, and I'm probably one of them, that Congress got way too involved that decided matters that should have been left to the states. But, you know, I think it's up to the states to decide what elector they want to send.
Yeah. I was watching on the news yesterday that some states start counting the ballots now, so they're prepared. Some states count the ballots 2 days before, and some states don't count ballots till the day of. And they have tens and thousands and just thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of votes this year that have already been mailed in. So usually say it's 500. Now it's 50, it's just a exponentially higher. And so for those people that aren't counting until the day of, that's going to be really tricky. Well, we have 4 minutes. So who would like to take, Cathy, did you go? Okay, Tova, go ahead, Tova.
So I was wondering, you were talking earlier about how the Electoral College is a uniquely American system. And do you think it would work in any other countries, or is something about America that makes the Electoral College work? What do you think?
That's an interesting question. Look, sure. I think something like it could work anywhere. Sometimes I've advocated for it to be used for governor's elections at the state level, or something that mimics the principles in the Electoral College at least. I mean, it's hard to think how you're going to do that in other countries that don't have states. It's probably going to be precisely the same, but you could mimic the principles, right? And I do think the principles of division of power between a local and a national, and decentralizing the election and giving local entities a certain amount of control over how they want their part of the country to be represented. Sure. I mean, I think you could use that. To some degree, I think, other countries have systems that do kind of similar things. A prime minister can be elected without the support of the majority of people, which much as you might hear the complaints about the president of the United States. And of course, their system works a little bit different. You have members of parliament that are elected, and the members of parliament then elect the prime minister. And so and if you have differing numbers of voters or people, and that's how that works, is how voting for those members of parliament, you could actually have a prime minister elected, even though not as many people voted for that prime minister's party. I think to me, I guess the important part is division of power, recognizing that all of these checks and balances work together to keep people honest, even when they don't want to be, and to make sure that a variety of interests are represented in a country. And that's the important part.
Unity is pretty important. I think the unity is really important, and respecting an election, the election's results are really important. That's what America's always been able to do, a peaceful transfer of power. And we had a winner one year that was, that talked about, I think she said this in your video, Tova, but she was talking about the fact that if there's a president that you don't like, that in 4 years, you have an opportunity to overturn that president, and that keeps people peaceful, to know that they have some power coming up in about 4 years. But it's the peaceful transfer of power has been one of our hallmarks that so many other countries cannot do. Well, listen, Tara Ross, you are phenomenal. And everybody hold up our book again. Please check out your book's available, I'm sure, everywhere, right? It's available on Amazon.
Yeah, you can get it most places, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or whatever. And I hope everybody enjoys it.
Well, it's a wonderful book, and mine is over here, but I have to get up to get it. But thank you so much for explaining this to us today. Really, really, now we all understand it so much better, and you were terrific, really terrific. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.